Yes, hello. Today we're going to be discussing the top 10 non-EX cards in the current game of Pocket in terms of meta. It's my own subjective opinion, so if you disagree with it, then you just disagree with it. I don't really care. So let's get to it. So first off, as you can see on screen, we've got Komala. This is number 10. It's held back by its ability Comatose, but what it does offer is Rolling Tackle, which is 2 energy for 70. What you only need to know about this card really is that it's an Oricoro counter. It is used in Darkrai Giratina decks. Generally speaking, I myself tech it in Charizard just to deal with Oricoro, so it's not an auto loss. And yeah, so that's all there is to it. It's an Oricoro counter, thus it can't get any higher than number 10. But number 10 nonetheless. And at number 9, we have Snorlax. So Snorlax is an interesting card because at first glance, it doesn't look that good. 100 damage for 4 energy is meh, and then on top of that, putting it to sleep is also eh. However, you have access to the trainer card Berry, which cuts the energy cost in half, essentially. So all of a sudden, 2 energy for 100 is a really big deal. It is really strong, and on top of that, its HP pool allows it to tank a whole bunch of hits. Then you have access to cards like Lima or Solgaleo that can just swap it for free. So you have cards that allow you to play around its really horrible retreat cost, and even if you don't, you have access to usually other cards in the back that help mitigate the retreat cost and how much at a disadvantage this card can put you at. But there's obviously big caveat: if you don't find Berry, if you have to build it up naturally, if your opponent uses it as a way to keep you stuck and unable to actually continue your game plan, this card can also backfire. And when it does, and when your opponent plays around Snorlax, then it can fall flat. And this is why it sits at number 9. And at number 8, we have Magnazone. So, I know what you're going to be saying. This thing just recently won the biggest tournament of all time in Pocket, and it's only sitting at number 8. But hear me out before you boo me and dislike the video, because I think it's quite important to note that this card cannot use Rare Candy. That, I think, is the biggest detriment to this card, okay? You have to ride it up from Magnemite to Magneton to Magnazone. And that's the only real way that you're going to get enough energy to then apply appropriate pressure whilst playing with your other half of the deck, which we'll get to that card eventually. It's on the list, don't worry. So, yeah, with that being said, I think that's the biggest reason why Magnazone can't go any higher, because it itself is not what generates energy. Therefore, it itself is just one of those cards that is only as good as its pre-evolution. And if we didn't have the Magneton that generates energy, this card would probably not see competitive play. Even though this card itself is good and has proven to be good, it's a good card, it's not good enough without its Magneton evolution line. So with that being said, it hits at number 8. And at number 7, we have Tapulele, and I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So all you need to know about this card is that it's great as a tech card. It's great for controlling your opponent's board. It helps with Cyrus targeting. It helps with actually just cleaning up on pesky Giratinas. It's honestly fantastic of a card. Essentially what it does, which most of you know, I mean, I hope you can read, it literally says it on the screen, but in case that you can't, it does 20 damage for each energy on the attached Pokemon that it's attacking. So Giratina is usually hitting at around 4 energy, so that's 80 damage. That's huge. For 1 energy, that's barely a cost. That's like nothing. You're essentially swinging at them and killing them. The only reason why I'm putting this at number 7 is simply because in the current meta, it isn't, let's say, dominating. It's a good card, it's doing well in said meta, and it definitely gets used a lot, but it's not the defining card in this meta right now. It's a good card, and that's good enough. So with that being said, it can only really sit at number 7. And at number 6, we have Crobat. Now, this is a card that exponentially got better with Rare Candy. This is probably a stage 2 that I fear when I see an Arceus deck. When I see Arceus or Arceus or whatever you like to call it, I like to call him Arceus, but, you know, side point. Whenever I see Crobat, I fear this thing. This thing doing 30 damage is stupid. It is just stupid. I know it only hits the front, but I mean, Darkrai hits only the front for 20. This thing's a monster, and then you pair it with Darkrai and you're swinging for 50 without actually making an attack. It's gross. It's just absolutely gross. It's a menace, and it does well in tournaments. It's not necessarily like the most dominating deck in the meta, but when you see this card and when you see that deck, you have to respect it, because if it high rolls you, you are generally dead. There is usually no coming back from this deck. This deck's speed is insane. It is a combo deck, so when it bricks, it bricks. When it's not quick enough to pick up the pieces, it just has to hope that its opponent is just as slow. So obviously there are issues, thus it can't be higher than number 6, but number 6 is still an amazing placement for a card that is a stage 2, so kudos to Rare Candy for making this thing even more stupid than it already was. And at number 5, we have the one and only Magneton. Now this card, on its own, it's nothing special. But because of Magnazone, it gets elevated so high. It essentially is the enabler to Magnazone. As I discussed before, Magnazone being on the list on its own is simply just due to the fact that this thing enables it so well that it is actually a threat in the meta. And it's clear to me that it is because it is great at countering specific decks, Dark Tina, and other decks like that. So as a result, we have this thing that, you know, when it first came out, no one really played it. I mean, it's garbage. It's like, just on its own, it is garbage. But then you add in its extra evolution, and all of a sudden, this thing is pumping out numbers. It is actually a threat. Your opponent actually wants to deal with this when it's on the board. And if they can't, they gotta deal with Magnazone. And Magnazone is even worse because this thing set it up. So the reason why I'm not putting it any higher than number 5 is simply because on its own, without Magnazone, it just wouldn't be a card that could make this list. And with it having Magnazone, it's just automatically, this card is amazing. So it goes to show that specific cards that you get in the future can really affect a card that was initially released. So a card that was once considered garbage can become amazing just from one set. So this is just a testament to the fact that Magneton, and generally speaking, abilities that help you self-charge energy, is just stupid and really strong. So with that being said, it's number 5 on this list. And at number 4, we have Meowskarata. Now this is another card that really benefited from Rare Candy. Going straight from Sprigatito to Meowskarata is potentially game-winning in some cases, depending on the matchup too. If you're up against a Darkrai, that's insta-KO if they don't have Cape on, because you're doing 150. Don't forget, Darkrai is weak to grass. If you're swinging against Giratina, you're dealing 130. I mean, that's also insane, because if they swing back at you, first off, they have to have Giovanni to kill you back. That's assuming if you don't have Leaf Cape on, or if you're weird and still run Giant Cape, but I would run Leaf Cape at this point because you have access to it. But let's say they swing for 130 plus the Giovanni, which that doesn't happen anymore, but let's say it did. Meowskarata would still only give them a point, and then they die because they dealt 20 damage to themselves, unless they have Giant Cape, right? So generally speaking, this thing just puts in massive work. It's great against all EX cards, obviously, because it's doing 130 damage. That's insane. And there's not much more that needs to be explained about this card. The fact that also Sprigatito searches for cards as a basic, like randomly, of course, and it's grass, but the fact that it does that only elevates Meowskarata to this spot even further, because you get Rare Candy, you get Meowskarata, and you've just high-rolled your opponent. Now, where it falls flat is if you're up against non-EX decks. This is why I couldn't rank it any higher, because when you're up against a non-EX deck, that's when you want to be using Magnazone. That's when you want to be using those cards essentially to battle that war of attrition, because 60 flat damage for 2 energy, not saying it's bad, like, it's definitely solid, but it's not good enough, right? And there can be issues with that, so you need to have, in that case, Erica, you need to have access to Lily in order to keep up with the fight. You need to have Leaf Cape and hope that your opponent doesn't Guzma you. There's things to consider when using this card, and sometimes you want its helper in order to actually keep up with the opponent instead of having to use it. Obviously, this on its own is good. 140 base HP is nothing to scoff at. It's solid and does well against most decks. So with that being said, it's number 4. And at number 3, we have Oricoro. Now, I know what you're going to say. Before you even say it, why is this not number 1? Because despite it being such a powerful card against EX cards, it is still not dominating and not warping the meta around it. We are adding some techs, and definitely the game has bigger and greater variety because of this, hence why I'm putting it at number 3. But it hasn't warped it to the point where EXs have kind of fallen flat. EX decks are still very prominent. Darkrai Giratina is very prominent. They just run Kamala Harris and boom, Oricoro dead, okay? You put Giant Cape on this, okay, they Kamala, and then they also ping you with Darkrai. It's still dead. One shot, 90. right? So it's not that easy to say that, but this walls Giratina decks. Not entirely. This card itself, despite being as good as it is, which is crazy considering it's literally just a bird with 2 pom-poms, it's good, it's solid, it's great even, but it didn't do enough to warrant it in the number 1 spot. So with that being said, Oricoro only takes number 3, but I think a deserved number 3. And at number 2, we have Rampardos. And yeah, if you think that this card should be below Oricoro, I don't know what rock you live under, because Rampardos, since it became part of the Lucario line, it's essentially just never left the meta. It has probably been one of the most longest running meta cards in the game for 1 energy. It is by far the best fossil card in the game. It's insane. It's insane. 1 energy for 130 damage is stupid. It's just stupid. You add red to that and you're one-shotting Giratinas, you're one-shotting Darkrai's, you're one-shotting most threats in the meta that are EXs. And let's say you can't red because it's not an EX, 130 is still great. You add that Lucario in it, so 150. You decide you can't do that because you're running a better deck. Okay, we have Garchomp. Okay, Garchomp hits for 50, then you clean up with 130. It's still 180, right? There's just so many things that Rampardos does well and consistently. And let's say you don't kill your opponent, you just deal damage. Then in that case, you're not even dealing damage back to yourself. You only hurt yourself if you've killed your opponent. This card is stupid. It's just generally stupid. The only thing that and I wouldn't even say it balances the card, is the fact that it has 2 retreat costs. That's just like the little tap on the wrist, like, bad Rampardos, go now, go kill things. And that's why it's sitting at number 2. So with that being said, I think people should agree with me on this. It should be at number 2. It's been so powerful, and honestly, it's an insane card. All right, and let's now talk honorable mentions before we move on to the number 1 card. First up on our honorable list is Carnivine. Essentially, reason why Carnivine doesn't make the list is because in order for it to really play, you need to play it in an Arceus deck, and a lot of Arceus decks are opting right now to play Crobat, since Crobat is just a lot more aggressive, it is a lot more pressure, and some decks are running the Crobat Carnivine Arceus line. However, by doing that, they have to play dual energy, or they have to play grass energy and not let Crobat attack, and that can be very detrimental. So it just doesn't make the list because it's becoming less and less popular. Next card on the list for honorable mentions is Rockruff. Rockruff's attack is Signs of Evolution. Basically search for the Lycanroc, and it's just so free. It's such a good card. I think the reason why it's not getting to be on the list is because it's just not one of those cards that has warped the meta around it. It's not a tech card, it's a mainstay card, right? But it's not as popular of a deck. With so many strong decks out there, why run this when you could run some of the better decks that have better results? Another card on the list is Skarmory. I think Skarmory has taken a nosedive. It was really good, but it got replaced in the Magnazone deck with Meowskarata. Solgaleo is just not doing as well as people were expecting it to, so Skarmory once again fell flat, and that's all you need to know. And then finally we have Serena. This card is actually picking up steam. However, the fact that you do have to rely on a coin flip does hurt this card a bit. For 1 energy, you can hit a maximum of 150, and I have done that quite a bit, so it is kind of stupid, but there are also those times where you hit triple tails and it does nothing. So it's just one of those cards that, yes, it can do really well, but if it gets one-shot, then your healing doesn't matter. And a lot of the cards in the meta right now can one-shot this. But don't ignore it because it has won a tournament, and that is pretty impressive. All right, and in number 1, we have Greninja. And now, before you say anything, but Rampardos has been out in the meta longer than Greninja. Yes. However, and I think this is where I need to bring this in, Rare Candy, while it boosted Rampardos, it elevated Greninja in such a way that it became such a meta-defining card that it kind of warped the meta around it. Let me give you an example of this. The second best deck currently in the meta is Giratina EX Greninja, followed by Greninja EX Oricoro. Then we have Greninja Giratina EX, and these are all variants. But the point being, these decks came out because Greninja just does way too much. Being able to ping whatever is like Crobat, but on steroids. Yes, it's 10 less damage, but you essentially get to pick things off as you find fit. It helps pair up with Tapulele. It helps you to set up with Giratina. You can do things with Darkrai, assuming that you're playing it with Darkrai for whatever reason. Like, there's just so much flexibility with Greninja, and 60 base damage for 2 energy, and 1 that's even colorless, meaning that you can run dual energy, allowing you to, with Oricoro, run water and electric, and then essentially start swinging with both of them, because they each run 1 color, 1 colorless. It's stupid. It's powerful, and there's a reason why this thing is doing so well in tournaments and just overall. So unless they power creep this game even further, which they will, so don't worry about that, they'll get there. But until then, Greninja is going to be a mainstay. I mean, its ability is just stupid. It's powerful, and it can essentially win you games on its own. I mean, I can't even count how many times my opponents have conceded just because I built Greninja way too fast. And when you do that, it's really hard to come back from that, unless you have like some sort of massive game plan, or you're like a Charizard deck or something with a lot of base HP. So that's why it's number 1. It's just a really strong card with a very fair retreat cost. Well, actually, maybe it's too fair. And it just exponentially got better because rare candy is in the game. So, did you agree with the list? If you disagree, tell me what are your thoughts. What are the cards that should have been in this list? What you would have ranked it? Maybe I am trash. I don't know. I mean, I'm in Master Ball, but maybe I'm still a trash player. So with that being said, hope you guys have yourselves a fantastic day. Have yourselves a salty day. And I will see you in the next Widgeio.